David, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation about the film you worked on, Chasing Summer. I'm really excited to talk with you about this film. I had the chance to watch it a couple days ago.
Oh, great. Did you see it with an audience or on
No,
a?
I saw it at home. I wish I could have watched it at the festival, but the thing about it is that my husband and I, we're massive Eliza Schlesinger fans, and he couldn't go to the festival, and so I committed to waiting until I got home so that we could watch it together. Um, so I guess I want to start with talking about your Sundance experience. How was Sundance for you this year?
Oh, it was great. I mean, it's not for me. The first time I went to Sundance, I went as a director, and so going as an editor or something is not as much fun. You know, don't get invited to many things, and it's just a different experience. But I think it was great to see the film with an audience, and the reaction was amazing. I was asking you because there's been a very different response from reviewers who watched it alone on their computers. Right?
Mm.
People who watched like some people who watched alone said this is not funny at all. But if you see with the audience there, it's like crazy laughter all the way through. So
This is a
it's
good topic to go into because I do think, we're in a time where we're trying to preserve the theatrical experience while streamers are kind of pulling movies onto streaming and at home. And I think that there's a time and place for everything, but I would agree. Like I got to watch this with my husband, and so we did find it pretty funny and got to laugh together. But that theatrical experience, I'm confident that that would have just elevated that experience for me. Talk to me a little bit more about your perspective on the difference, maybe in comedy or in other genres, between watching a film at home by yourself and watching it with an audience in the theater.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's not something I have like a really developed thoughts on, but this movie for definitely makes a difference. Um, I guess I found that this is the first like real comedy that Josephine and I have worked on. So it was something where we had there's a very different react. We did screenings once a week every Wednesday in the edit room because we had to edit the film so quickly. But it is a radically different experience to see it with a small group of people versus a large group of people. And yeah, I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. It's the first
Mm-hmm.
film I've seen that experience that strongly with. I guess the other would be like thriller or horror type films where you the kind of what
Mm-hmm.
around you are experiencing makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Um, cool. Well, I was doing a little research and I came across an article that where you were talking about editing the film and coming in when you guys were really close to the submission date. And so it sounds like there was a really short time frame for you to get this film edited. I want to talk a little bit more about that. And I guess what I really want to know is what changed about your workflow that you would usually have over a longer period of time. What changed about that in order to make this editing process quicker and fast and more fast tracked?
Yeah, well, it was part of the game from the beginning with this movie, which
Hmm.
was that it was shot in 2.5 weeks in August, and then we had to submit it after 6 weeks of editing. And Josephine's movies, well, some of her more personal movies have taken a year and a half to edit. So it was like a challenge, But
Hmm.
um, we submitted, in fact, during the director's cut. So contractually, it was before the producers were even allowed to see the movie. Although we kind of made an exception and showed it to them a couple days before so they could give some feedback. Um, what changed? Well, having done so many movies together, it was, made a big difference. This is our sixth or seventh film we've worked on together, and we developed kind of a way of working and we kind of understand what each other think and trust each other's insights, and so we were able to do it quicker. I think the only thing that we did, we knew that it had to be quick, so we were on a different kind of approach, like less exploration, but not a whole lot less exploration. It was just accelerated. We did do, which we never did before, is we started doing internal screenings from probably the second week, like from just after the assembly, which helped us to see things. Because part of my metaphor for editing is you need to seeing what you need to see things, from outside of yourself, that the way other people are going to experience them. And so I think that allowed us to short circuit some. We might have spent some time going in certain directions that ultimately would not have worked. But instead of spending a lot of time going down those directions, we nipped them in the bud. you know, each Wednesday, each Wednesday we had this screening, and yeah, I don't know. Somehow it worked. It was when we got the call that it was in Sundance. It was kind of a surprise that it actually pulled it off.
How exciting. Yeah, and congratulations on making that happen. Um,
Thanks. Yeah.
let's let's talk a little bit more about editing. I am curious as someone who uses Adobe Premiere, and I understand you use Adobe Premiere to cut this film.
Uh-huh.
Um, I'm always interested in learning more from more seasoned editors about how to best use this software. And so I'm curious to know what tools helped make this editing process for Chasing Summer uh, easier for you in Adobe.
For the main thing, well, I'm the least technical editor in the world, so I'm not going to help you a lot. But the thing with Adobe, which has been amazing for me, is the productions, Adobe Productions, because I tend to um, like to work with some, other editors. We had an additional editor named Julie Cohen, who comes from television comedy primarily, and so she came on. I don't know, sometime in the last third of it. And Josephine also sometimes is hands-on, and sometimes, like I'm in Chile during the shoot, I didn't need to be in Los Angeles. So the productions is really great in that it allows you to have multiple people working. You can set it up so multiple people are working on the cuts. And nor, beforehand we would be emailing cuts back and forth and reconnecting media and stuff, and it was a nightmare. And some things would go wrong, and this just makes it great. So I love the productions for that reason. And otherwise, Premiere for me is just, I mean, I work in both Avid and I've never worked in any of the other softwares, but Avid and Premiere. And Premiere is just very easy and intuitive. If you've grown up using Macs, then you basically can use it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do rely a lot on having a great assistant editor. Like we used productions with Lucid Link so that we could, since we didn't have a server, we were all in different places at different times. Everything was always in sync too. So
Yeah, so explain a little bit more about Lucid Link. I've heard about this, but I'm not as familiar with it as I probably should be.
yeah, well, I don't know that much about it. It's just I always rely on having a genius assistant editor. And Adam Bucksbaum, who was our assistant editor, I said not many people have done this combination yet, but Lucid Link basically is a system where you can have certain things in the cloud, aspects of the cut in the cloud, and certain things on the drive. And we kind of switched what that was at some points in the production. But it like if you upload a new cut, like I'm doing a cut, it automatically is uploaded to everybody else at the same time. Or if you bring in
Mm,
new sound effects, we're always bringing in sound effects or archival footage or whatever. It can all be sunk to the 4 or 5 people who have drives. And so there's also another thing where we would be doing like laborious like uploads and downloads and putting it into your drive and making, and it just makes everything pretty seamless. We had no, so for like kind of like the kind of editing that's developed out of the pandemic where people are a little more remote in general, and I think it's pretty amazing.
yeah, I mean, I think that's why I'm curious about this because I mean, I live in the Pacific Northwest, which is a lovely place to live, but it's outside of a whole lot of industry places, so it's not like you can just go down the street and collaborate in editing. I do have to do things remotely, so it's interesting hearing about how to bridge that gap in files and editing and being able to work with people remotely in that way. So, um,
And we were in person for the most of the cut because it
okay.
sort of didn't work
Hmm.
so well to just doesn't work for like the flow of ideas, like especially at the beginning when you're trying to figure out what the movie's about and all that. It's harder remotely, but there were parts where we're remote.
Yeah, it's definitely better to be in person, but having that capability is for remote connection is great. Um, I want to know a little bit more from your experience about editing, and I guess the question that I want to ask is, what is a common mistake that editors make that uh, and how would you recommend avoiding that mistake?
Oh, geez, I don't know. What are the common mistake? Do you have some ideas of common mistakes? I mean, I would. it's not generally the editor's fault. It's generally like, because at least in the kind of movies I work on,
Mhm.
they're very director driven, and features tend to be more director driven.
Yeah,
So
maybe I'm talking about more in terms of workflow. And I'm asking this because like I'm editing a short project, or at least I'm about to start editing a short project, and I don't know what I don't know, right? And so going into this process, I have my content creating experience for editing, but I am trying to adapt that into a short film project editing, and I don't know, is there a part of the workflow that editors tend to skip or tend to not understand? Is there something with how you should organize your media that editors don't do, or that amateur editors don't do because it's too time consuming? Like, I guess that's what I'm looking for. Like, what mistakes
I'm
might
never
amateur
involved.
editors make?
I'm a really messy editor. So like again, the assistant is the person who organizes stuff, and Adam does. It was the most flawless like treating of dailies I've ever encountered. Um,
So what I'm hearing is the biggest mistake is not having an assistant editor like Adam.
a lot of editors that have come up through, like when I was in film school, we edited on 60 millimeter work prints, and we didn't talk a lot about like what's the best brand of tape or whatever. It wasn't, there's nothing technical about it. And then and then as I was like getting involved in film, you started to edit offline on 3/4 inch tapes and then go back and reconform the negative. And then there was the montage system, then there was the Avid system. The workflow was changing so much that at a certain point, I just decided I don't want to use that much of my brain to keep learning a new workflow every 18 months or something. So I kind of just stepped out of the technical part of it.
That's interesting. All right, so have a great assistant editor, and just recognize that the workflow is probably going to change as things innovate.
But I don't know in terms of like, so my experience of like what the mistakes would be more about, how you interact with the director or how
Mm.
like are not like looking for, I see films by friends of mine where they haven't really taken the time to, they're almost like afraid to see how the public is going to react to the film. And so they don't test it and so on. And then they find out later when it's released, which is a worse time to find out that things don't work. You know? So,
I think that's a good answer to my question, because I probably wouldn't have thought about test screenings. I would just think I'm doing what I'm supposed to, and yeah, that's really unfortunate to get to release and realize that.
I mean,
Yeah.
there are brilliant filmmakers who don't do screenings and are very super auteur and they make things that are unlike anyone else in the world. And, but I haven't, it's not the world that I've lived in yet. Josephine is very, very unique as a filmmaker, but she also wants to see how people experience her films. Like, are they experiencing them the way that she's expecting that they'll experience them?
Mhm. Absolutely. I have a couple more questions about the film before we wrap up. So something I was thinking about as we were watching it is, I mean, this is a mature film, and there are a couple spicy scenes in the movie between Jamie, the main character, and her love interest at the time, Colby. So I'm curious as an editor when it comes to these, and I guess I think about this when I watch mature movies, but I'm curious as an editor, how do you go about those conversations with Josephine to decide what the spice level of scenes should be?
That's an interesting topic with this one because, well, look, I mean, where I'm working, it's like always the director's decision, but I always say what I think,
Mhm.
and when this is something that came up a lot in screening. So with this, the sex scenes were all like 10 times longer than they are in the current film. She wanted to have more, and ultimately, like the film for her was about a woman kind of discovering pleasure and letting herself experience pleasure where she hadn't before. And once she kind of figured that out, then that gave us a kind of North Star to orient the film around. But in terms of the sex scenes, yeah, we showed them almost every time we showed them, everybody was like, okay, I get it.
Mhm.
They don't need to be that long. There's always things when you're making a film which are really engaging and fascinating for you. But like I worked on a film in Nepal once and we had it was so hard to get a helicopter because the helicopters are like $50,000 a day. We got this guy to bring a helicopter and land it in the village, and all the kids are running around and looking at it. And that helicopter shot felt like was the highlight of the movie for us. And everyone else who was watching it was like, "What's with that helicopter shot?" We only need like 3 seconds to know there's a helicopter, and then you can cut. So the sex scenes were a little like that, in that they, Josephine was very engaged because she's like really inside the movie. She was engaged with them in a way that some people in the audience would be, and some people wouldn't. And so we ended up um, kind of changing them around and trimming them. But the biggest change was that what came from a screening where a director, great Greek director friend of ours, Tamar-Kali, came, and she said, because the sex wasn't at the end of the film. The
Oh.
whole ending is something that we came out of the editing. There was no ending to the film when we were editing the film. Um, and then I think, I'm not sure if the moment that she pulls him back inside might have been at the end. I think that was at the end of the one that Athena said. But she said, like instead of having all these very long sex scenes in the middle of the movie, if it's about pleasure, it should end with an endless sex scene. And that idea really worked.
I
We actually,
love that. What a suggestion.
yeah, worked great. And we actually went back in the pickups and shot more the sex in the shower part so it could be extended and go longer.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah, that was a cool, creative decision there. I really appreciate that. Um Very cool. So I guess in the last question, kind of talking about the end, and we're gonna try very hard to keep this non-spoilery, but there is a pretty big plot twist in this movie at the end. And so without spoilers, I'm curious how that plot twist informed how you edited the movie leading up to making that as big of a reveal as possible.
The big plot twist, not the one at the very end, but the one
Not
in
the
the
one at the very end, the one I guess there's
yeah.
also an intimate scene there too.
For the most part, so there's another thing that comes out of the testing is there
Mm,
are people who figure it out immediately
mm,
now, and there are people who don't understand. I mean, I would say when we screened it in the Sundance premiere, the majority, 9/10 of the audience had no idea what was coming. So it was really a matter of balancing. We're trying to balance clues, but there's certain people whose brains are very logical, like, well, I can talk about another movie. I could
mm.
not give it away. So,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
in the Sixth Sense, when Sixth Sense
Mhm.
ends, and his ring falls on the ground and the audience screams, I had no idea what happened. 2 weeks later, I read a review and I was like, oh, I get it. He's dead. But I didn't understand it watching the movie. When I watched it with my wife, in the first scene where he sits down to dinner with his wife, she gets, oh, I get it. He's dead. Like 10 minutes into the movie.
Mm, mhm.
There are certain people whose brains are very logical. And so the moment they say, I had a son, they were like, "Oh, that's it. She's sleeping with his son."
Mm, mhm, mhm.
Oh, you might have to bleep that out.
Editing, right? We're gonna get Adobe Premiere on that one.
So there are people who pick up on there's certain clues.
Mhm,
There are very few of them, but maybe twice, and they pick up on that and they put it together in a way that, but I think very few people do.
mhm,
Um, but we did kind of play with that and try to figure it out, like how not to have people figure it out, because it has to be a surprise, ideally, but then looking back, it's totally logical, right?
mhm. Yeah, 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 that makes sense. I mean, it's really hard to do that. Like you said, if you're dropping the clues, somebody's brain might figure it out. But I think it's just a matter of trying to edit it in a way that the majority of people are so engrossed in the story that it kind of goes over their head until the reveal happens. And so I think, and maybe that also plays into what you were talking about with seeing it with an audience versus seeing it alone. Maybe being in the theatrical environment kind of has you enveloped in the experience more than the you know, trying to piece things together kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we tested it and we took in, added and subtracted clues, and in the end, we found like there's a tiny fraction of people are going to figure it out no matter what.
Mhm.
We couldn't, if we, the only way we could make it not like so they wouldn't figure it out is to make it not make sense. So
Right. Totally, totally. And so I think that balance really worked when the reveal happened. I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
okay, okay, I see what that part was about." Um,
in the
so
it was funny in the premiere, people were like yelling and clapping so much that they missed the beginning of the fight because they were making so much noise.
Oh, that's great. I wish I could have been at the premiere. That sounds like it was a great time.
In the fight that we bring in this music that comes from Altman's Popeye.
Mm,
That's
mhm.
thing, and that you couldn't even hear that music because people were yelling. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I'm gonna bring this to a close. Any final thoughts that you want to explain to people, or anything that you want audiences to understand before going into watching Chasing Summer?
No, I think it's I mean, it's a movie that I think works as a kind of genre movie more or less, but
Mhm.
Josephine is always taking a, you know, funny, interesting twist on these things. Um, and her films really come together in editing. I mean, she talks a lot about that the way that we work together is we really look at the footage. We're not trying to like spend 6 months trying to make the script work. We see what the movie is in the footage, and we kind of like, you know, start with an assembly, but then we really figure out like, oh, okay, these scenes need to be in different orders, and we rearrange a lot of things, and you know, it's all about the emotional journey you're going on. Yeah, but what's interesting with her films is like Terrence Malick's, or you know, the handful of people who work like this, they really are made in the editing in a way.
Mm. That's really great to hear it. I feel more comfortable with how I'm approaching my project, because I think that the edit's really gonna be where the my movie develops as well, and so it's nice to know that that's a standard thing, and it's not just me being disorganized or not forethoughtful.
That's the way of working that I think has good results.
That's fair. Well, David, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I'm really happy to have your insight on Chasing Summer. I'm glad I got to see the film, and once again, congratulations on the film premiering at Sundance. And I look forward to seeing where it goes, and seeing more people's reactions to it as it goes out into the world.
Cool. Thanks so much.